but it's really important for us to be employing the evidence on nutritional treatments. Thank you. Hope I can present you more information later.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. And now we have Christopher at the helm, and he's got a full presentation. This is also his member spotlight. Go ahead, Chris.
Good morning, Madam Premier. Thank you so much, Catherine and Sandra, for putting on this event for everyone here. And also, I want to remember the 8 fallen firefighters who were killed in the line of duty fighting fires across Western Canada this year. I've been involved in health and safety for the past 23 years. I'm a Canadian registered safety professional, and I got into wildland firefighting about 8 years ago because I saw a situation in our province that I felt was unacceptable. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail later. So I've started off with 2 fire trucks and 4 firefighters, and now I've got a small fleet of 8 fire trucks, and I have 30 paid-on-call firefighters who work with me to help protect our municipalities across Alberta. So we've been contracted to the government of Alberta and to various municipalities, and we've been involved with Fort McMurray, Waterton, High Level, and Crete, and pretty much across Alberta and into the Northwest Territories this year, helping protect the municipalities. Sorry, I forget I got this clicker here. But what we're doing right now is not sustainable, and these are not my words. Ken McMullen, who's the Red Deer Fire Chief and the President of the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs, is saying the exact same thing. We've also got our leading scientists who study Canadian wildfires saying that Canada needs to have a national firefighting force. And why is this? Well, in Alberta alone, different numbers say between 29,000 to 36,000 people were evacuated through our communities. And yet, the federal government has provided no response to this. There's no discussion about creating a dedicated firefighting force. And today they announced a $1 billion cut to our Canadian forces, which makes their ability to respond to our emergencies even that much more critical. And this devastation is going from coast to coast to coast. We've seen Halifax evacuated. BC looks like a war zone. We had an entire territory of 27,000 people come into Alberta and British Columbia and Saskatchewan because there was no refuge left up in the Northwest Territories. So we need to think about this for a second. Most human-caused fires are actually very quick to put out because they're generally by road access. But the worst fires are caused by lightning strikes, and it's very hard for them to be put out right away, but they get to be too large for us to deal with. But we need to keep in mind that the big wall of fire that we see on TV is not the actual threat. If you have about 30 meters of space or 100 feet of space between the tree line and your structure, the radiant heat is not enough to actually cause that structure to burn. It'll cause the siding to melt, but that's it. The actual threat to wildfires are your firebrands, your embers that can fly up to 7 kilometers ahead of the main fire. These land in your potted plants, in your patio furniture, your decks, anything like that, and it causes a small fire that causes the larger house to burn. So if you look back at previous wildfires, previous studies indicate about 95% of home losses in wildfires are due to these firebrands. But what we're doing in Alberta is crazy, Madam Premier. We've got 3 4-person teams contracted through volunteer fire services in High Level, Slave Lake, and Clearwater County. And because of this, we're seeing High Level, our most northern and remote fire service, heading down to the U.S. border. We're seeing 40 Mile County sending resources to the Northwest Territories. We're seeing Wainwright running Code 3 or running red all the way to Drayton Valley when these emergencies happen. We don't have a sustainable response. And probably what infuriated me the most is we had tree planters coming to Alberta with sprinkler trailers working alongside firefighters. So they get 5 days of training and they're being put into this kind of environment. But BC will not allow Alberta contract firefighters over because we will interrupt the business relationship they have with the BC Fire Chiefs Association and the IAFF. So what does this look like to us as well? When we have a disaster, AEMA has to call over 700 fire chiefs and ask what they have for spare capacity. And we're not their only boss, they have other bosses to deal with. They have to deal with the local mayor, the council, the CAO, and the local population. They also have to consider their own fire risk, their own flood risk, and also the fire underwriter survey, so making sure that they don't invalidate their own insurance requirements. And we have a real problem here that needs to be addressed. We have volunteer fire departments that are starting to act like small businesses. Instead of buying resources that are needed to protect their own community, they're buying sprinkler trailers because they want to go and put these things out on export for profit. So rather than taking $200,000 and buying a brush truck that they might need to deal with grass fires, they're buying a sprinkler trailer even if they don't have trees in their own county. And also the full-time fire services are not available for this. They want to help, but their own logistics don't work. They only could be out on deployment for 4 days, but when you have a day of travel there and back, plus a half day of orientation, they're really only in the field for 2.5 days. Like I saw in Yellowknife, it was almost useless having them up there, to be honest with you. As well, we have a problem with Alberta wildfire because they are not contractor friendly. I know I've tried for years, and other contractors have tried for years to create what are called contract type 1 firefighters. However, they'll bring in the African crews who are actually contractors. They brought in a lot of American contractors this year to fight fire. And actually, one of my firefighters sent me pictures counting 7 Washington State fire trucks driving up on Wednesday heading up north. I don't know where they went to, but I've got 8 fire trucks and 30 firefighters that are sitting right now that could have gone instead. As well, we got the federal government that's paying lip service to creating 1,000 firefighters, and they've been saying that for 2 or 3 years now, and nothing's happened yet. But what can we do? So Premier Smith, in your mandate letter to Minister Ellis, one of the items you specify here is introducing emergency management measures that will ensure the province is prepared to respond to any natural disaster or other emergency where it's required in the province. So what can be done? CAP, unfortunately they're not here. I was going to give them a good shout out. Alberta has a very unique resource. We have over 2,000 private firefighters that are, because of industry recommended practice for pumping flammable fluids, which pretty much requires a private fire truck to be at a frac site. So because of this, we've got about a dozen contractors, over 100 private fire trucks, and like I said, over 2,000 private firefighters that should be out there fighting fires for our province. There is no need for us to be bringing in imported firefighters when we got this resource. So my thought process is we should be looking at these firefighters on the same way how we deal with our snowplows in Alberta. We don't send snowplows from high level down to Pincher Creek, but we're sending our firefighters in that direction. Instead, we should be looking at how we deal with our highways. So let's have a contracted quick response force that could go anywhere across the province without depleting the local capacity of our volunteer firefighters. And this doesn't even touch on the issue of, doesn't even touch on the burnout that's happening with our volunteer firefighters, where we've seen over the past, I think, 10 years a decrease of over 20,000 firefighters across the nation. So what could this look like? And I'm just being very brief here, but I think we need to have 4 teams, 50 firefighters on a quick response force, so 200 firefighters altogether on retention. So this way, when an emergency comes in, it could be anything from a wildfire to a flood, earthquake, tornado, or even international. That call goes into AEMA, and they only have to call 4 people instead of 700 people to say, hey, we need your resources. Let's get them on the road and get them on the road quickly. And I've got an audacious goal. I want Alberta to be Canada's firefighter, and also want us to be the world's firefighter. I know we've got the people for it. I know that we have the ambition for it. And the firefighters that I've brought on, they just can't get enough of it. Even after we spent 14 days in Yellowknife, they didn't want to go home. They wanted to go out to Fort Smith. They wanted to go to Hay River. They wanted to keep fighting fire. And that's the kind of people that we have in this province that want to be out there protecting communities. But we just need to deal with this bureaucratic layer that's creating these situations that don't allow it to happen. As well, I think there's opportunity for us to start looking at how the Europeans fight fire. So they've got different types of equipment that we're just not going to see in North America, or in Canada anyways, because there's no incentive to do it, because it's expensive equipment. It's very custom for wildland firefighting, but no one's going to spend $800,000 on a piece of equipment if it only gets used maybe 2 or 3 times a year. Thank you so much for your time, everyone, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak today.